so I did not make myself clear about the journal. Journal 1 was due at midterm, but because of my trip, bumped it, right? And I know I did say that I might ask for that to come in early because of getting it graded, right? The problem is if you hand it in, it's got to be in the final binder, but if that's the first time I see it to grade it, then I'm going to struggle to get the grading done in time to get your final grades on that, right? They take a long time to grade. Adding another piece of work to that doesn't help. And we are not, as faculty, we get a day and a half to grade everything and get your grades on time. No. So, I know, and in fairness, I know that is some faculty members' answer to the problem, but I'm not going to go there. So, I want the journals that were written last week in this week so that I can maybe get them graded at least during the next week and a half so that they're not an added problem for the final, all right? So, in my head, that doesn't cause you a problem because you wrote the journal last week because that was the playground week the journal was being written on, okay? This morning, that did not seem to be the case. So, I need for you guys to get those journals written from last week. Yours is going to be from this week because you were playing last week, right? And I need those Friday, all right? So that I can try to get ahead a little bit. Otherwise, the rest of this semester is starting to look pretty ugly. We're behind on this class because I haven't finished chapter 10 yet. We don't have school on Wednesday. So chapter 11 will start on Friday. Please keep an eye on Blackboard because if I can do some jiggery-pokery with the scheduling, I may well do that to try to make sure that we're keeping up. That might mean that I tell you guys you're responsible for half a chapter, or I might cut a chapter. I don't know yet. All right? I just haven't had the time. My mum is back in the hospital in London, so I am all over the place right now. I apologize. I know that's not your problem, but there's only so much I can stay on top of when I'm trying to stay in touch with a 7-hour time difference, all right? So I am trying, I just don't want you all to suddenly at the end of the semester feel like I'm dumping on you because I wasn't paying attention during the semester, all right? So if we can get that journal out of the way, it'll help you for the end of the semester, it'll help me for the end of the semester, and please keep an eye on Blackboard and I'll see what I can do with this. Let me know.
Did you say on Blackboard or did you bring it
The journal, if you could bring me the hard copy on Friday in class, then, because then you can, then I can scribble on it and you can put it into your binder for the end of the semester. All right? Because you need that feedback, because then when you do the next journal, that feedback on the first one will help you do a better job with the second one. All right? Okay. We were doing chapter 10, right? Come on. Has anybody had trouble? I know there's been some issues with the lab exam in Blackboard. Is anybody having trouble getting to the lecture notes? No? Blackboard seems to be doing some weird things this semester. Alright, we did section of objects. Okay. All right, so we were talking about kinesthetic sense and receiving information from kinesthetic receptors. We have proprioceptors in our muscles, muscle spindles. We also have them in the tendons, Golgi tendon organs. We've got cutaneous receptors in our fingers and our feet and our skin. Right? So that information from those sensory organs is getting fed to the brain, and the brain uses that to help it make decisions that it's predominantly making based on our visual information. Right? Humans are not quite as good at paying attention to this kinesthetic information unless they're divers, trampolinists, dancers, gymnasts. They're better than those of us that don't have upside down twisting type training. Right? So I can tell, so if I get two pencils or two pins and we touch the skin, okay? As we get older, we get enough development in those skin receptors that I can tell it's still two pins or still two pencils until when they're very, very close together. Young children can't do that. There's a threshold at which when you touch them with two things, they perceive just one. Right? So we see development of these cutaneous receptors as well as the development of joint receptors that tell me where my arms are, my vestibular system that tells me where I am I upside down, am I tilted, am I twisting. And we know they can feel the touch, right? We know the brain can sense touching at birth, because we see that reflex that they turn their head in that direction. So the brain is certainly capable of interpreting information from cutaneous receptors at birth. Okay. And think about those reflexes that we talked about that were survival reflexes. You know, if there isn't light, then being able to feel is very important. And this threshold improves during childhood. Now, identifying body parts is quite tricky early on. So, even probably while on your short couple of trips to the playground so far, you might have had the kids say, oh, where is your elbow? Or where's your knee? Or because they're testing, they're finding out these body parts for themselves. And when we look at spatial dimensions in relation to themselves, they do up and down quite young, so they're quite good at I'm up or I'm down. It takes a while to learn the front of me, the back of me, and they're better at that with themselves than they are with another object. So if I have the ball in front of me, they are quite good at that by around 4 or 5. But if you ask them whether the ball is in front of the chair, they would have a little more problem. They're very egocentric, so transferring the idea to another object takes a little bit longer. And then finally, we get side to side. Right? So that's the hardest one, and it's also to do with laterality. So always try to relate something to themselves. When we're working with the young children, don't say, oh, that ball over there. Say, turn them around and go, look, that ball in front of you. So if you say the ball by the swing set, That's tricky for them. Okay. So laterality comes from this idea of learning side to side, which the sides of their body are distinct and they can move them separately. All right. So that at 4, 5, they're really working on that idea, and hopefully by the age of 10 they should be making good decisions with regards to that kind of information. And labeling left and right takes time, right? So in their head they know that they do this with this hand, but making sure that they know that's the right hand is still important. Okay? With that older class on the playground, they're probably ready, some of them are ready, to start saying which hand do you put on top when you hold the bag. Right? Some of them won't. The young class, don't even try it. Right? Because the young class, you'll be wasting your time. They don't know. Right? Dominance. So we don't just have handedness. The soccer players all know that we also have footedness. We also have a dominant eye and a dominant ear. So the ear one is interesting. When you answer your cell phone or when you call a friend, see which ear you usually hold your phone to. Because if you start to pay attention to it, you probably find that you use one ear more than the other when you're listening on your phone. There is some indication that infants seem to show a preference, but handedness, for example, isn't really established until around 4. So again, that younger group, not only can they not identify left and right, but their brains may not even have picked a preference yet. And we don't have to have pure dominance. We'll come back to that idea in a minute. Footedness, I'm not sure when footedness develops, whether it's the same time, because they don't tend to test that one, right? You don't get many children, you get some, but you don't get many children who can use both hands equally. Most of us have a pretty dominant side compared to the other. Right? There's not a lot of people that are not dominant on one side, but I don't have to be dominant on the same side for all the items. So my pure dominance means that I'm right-eyed, right-eared, right-handed, right-footed. Right? Historically, way back, 100 years or more back, they thought that if you didn't show pure dominance, that was an indicator that there was something not quite right with the system, that you were gonna have some kind of learning delay because everything wasn't being controlled by one side of the brain. There's no recent research to support that, so there wouldn't be any concern working with kids who prefer to kick the ball with their right foot but prefer to hit a tennis ball with their left hand. Right? It doesn't matter. From a cognitive learning point of view, it's not going to make any difference. Cross-lateral dominance means you're right-eyed and left-handed. Right? Unilateral means everything's happening on the same side. Remember that the opposite side of the brain controls the opposite side of the body. So, one having right-handed, right-footed, right-eyed just means that the left side of the brain is quite a bit dominant over the right. The left and right thing can be interesting to watch with children with developmental delays because they struggle to cross their midline, right? So if they're right-handed and you put the cup down on their left side, this makes their brain uncomfortable. So often what you'll see is, right? Okay? Because rather than stay here and do that, they'll move their whole body so that they can pick it up on the side. They don't have to cross the midline. Right? So that's an interesting indicator to look for. Because once they're able to do this, it's a good thing to do with scarves. Right? If you get them to toss the scarf with the left hand, grab it with their right hand, toss it with their right hand, grab it with their left hand. Maybe put a boundary, have them stand on a square or right in a circle so that they're not allowed to move their feet. What they have to do is cross the midline in order to catch the scarf. Right? So that can be a good training tool for children who are struggling with that concept. All right, I'm going to go through this bit quite quickly, but obviously in sport, one of the things we want to do is replicate something we did before, okay? That's why we practice. It's one of the reasons why we practice, because every time I go out there, I don't want to be faced with the idea that I'm not sure what I'm doing, right? I need to be able to replicate the movement over and over. That means I want to be able to reproduce something I did. My brain has to be able to send the exact same motor pattern to the muscles so that I can reproduce the movement. And I want to be able to relocate a limb if it's in the wrong place. So if I'm working on ground that is uneven, for example, if you're playing in the sand, or you've got a baseball or a football pitch that has a hole in it, right? I know out at the football stadium there are gopher holes that they sometimes have to step around while they're trying to run. So if I'm running and I'm reproducing running, and I have to change that action to go around the gopher hole, how do I do that? Right? How does my brain know where the leg is? So that perception of where something is without looking at it improves during childhood, right? Particularly later, around 9, 10, and going into puberty. So young children often will look, someone who's showing some delay in picking up this perception, possibly because they've got a developmental delay, possibly because they're not getting enough experience at it, and so the brain is a little behind the ball, right? Perception, I've got to know where things are without having to keep stopping. So when you watch the little ones, they're often looking at their feet. Levi does it a lot, right? He looks a lot at what he's doing because he's aware that he's aware of what he knows he wants to do, but he doesn't know where things are. William, no idea where his body is. No idea. I don't think, the falling over thing, I think is his brain's way of trying to learn some idea of what his body is doing. I really do. Because he just throws himself on the floor all the time. And he cannot, he's got absolutely no idea where he is in relation to other people. He often looks like he deliberately hits Levi in particular because they're good friends. Sometimes he does, but sometimes he just is not aware of where he is in relation to Levi. Okay? He's really got some perceptual issues going on. 12, directionality is linked with laterality. So as their idea of left and right gets better, their idea of direction gets better. They should be pretty good by the time they're 12, going into puberty. If they're not, then that's concerning, but it's an easy thing to work on, directionality in a PE class, right? Are you going to the left? Are you going to the right? Go forward to the next obstacle, go backwards to the next, right? It's quite easy to work on that when we're moving around. So make sure that you're thinking, you know, when you're teaching, how do I pull these other kinds? It's not just about hit the ball hard, right? There's a lot of other things that we can learn while we're moving. But you would have to incorporate the idea into your lesson plans in order to be able to assess whether the people that you're working with are getting better at it. Right? Transposing left and right gets better in adolescence. So mirror images with younger children cause problems. They actually cause problems with a lot of adults. Right? If you teach an aerobics class, it is quite tricky. If I don't have a mirror in an aerobics class and I've got to face my class in order to see what they're doing, then either I've got to decide to say, okay, let's move left, let's move right. That takes practice, saying the opposite thing to what you're actually doing, right? It takes a lot of practice. Or I've got to not teach, and I'm going to do an exercise session, and everybody else just gets to follow me, right? Because I'm not teaching, because I'm not looking at what the heck they're doing. So it can actually still cause some problems with adults as well. It's not just a child thing. With aging, I think we said last week, with aging, more of the problem is to do with the disruption in the information that is going to the brain rather than the brain's understanding of what is going on. All right? So that can lead to some frustration if you work with older adults. They often get very irritated with themselves because 10 years ago they would have been able to, you know, well, I could do this, well, I should be able to do this, because they know that their reactions aren't quite as sharp as they were before because this information is getting delayed or it's not very clear. We don't have as much research as we need on an older population when it comes to kinesthesis. If someone else moves their leg for them, so passive leg movement means someone else is doing it, then there's some indication that they're not very good at judging the amount of movement. It's not quite so bad if they're moving the leg for themselves. Right? Muscle tension seems to be okay. But we need tons more research in this area because falling is such a problem. Right? 60% of older adults who fall and break a hip don't live longer than a year. That's a large number. And a lot of falling is due to lack of correct information kinesthetically. Right? So we need to do some balance work with their eyes closed. We need to stress the kinesthetic system so that maybe it maintains. We don't know enough about why it degrades. So hopefully we'll get better at that because the falling thing is a problem. It's hard to get older adults active, which is what we want to do, right? We want to be active as we're older, but we also want to encourage our friends to stay active. Or you might want to teach older adults at some point in the future, and they're worried about falling. So if we could learn more about that, that would help us out quite a lot in our field of study. Okay, so we looked at vision, we looked at kinesthesis, auditory, can play more of a role in sport skills than we realise. We have the ear that we see, right? The middle ear, and then an inner ear, and they all play a role in what we hear, how that sound is transmitted to the brain, right? Grunting in tennis is a big issue right now if you watch any tennis, right? Because there are a couple of players who grunt at a ridiculous decibel level. They're actually measuring their decibel levels now, and they're like louder than a car or a train. I think I heard one say it's as loud as a plane taking off. I mean, it's like ridiculous levels of noise that they're making on a tennis court. Grunting's an interesting tool because whether you recognize that you do it or not, the sound of the ball on the racket gives you a lot of cues as to what that ball is doing. Right? Same in softball and baseball. The sound of the ball off the bat might give you a hint as to what that ball is going to do in the air. Right? So, what they do when they grunt is cover up the sound. And that means that you as the opposition have less information about whether they put slice on the ball, whether they hit the ball flat, whether they put topspin on the ball. Because they make so much noise, you can't hear the ball on the strings. So it takes away a little bit of information that your brain could use to help you make a decision on where to move. So grunting is a form of cheating for many people. Depends who you talk to. Others say, no, I just taught my player to do that because when we weight train, we say, breathe out on the effort. So I just tell them to breathe out on the effort. Well, it's okay, that's fine, but this isn't what they're doing. They're going, ah! Oh, okay, that has nothing to do with breathing out on the effort, right? So I sit on the side of the fence that grunting is a little bit of sportsmanship, and that's not something we should be promoting to children who want to play the sport, right? It's not fair. Play the sport fair. So, infants can detect a normal level speaking. They don't hear low frequencies very well, so people to them very quietly. They're not very good at that. But I don't have to shout at them because they're a baby and they can't hear me properly. Right? Just talking in your normal voice is recognizable for them. And within a week, you see a big change. It develops much more rapidly than their vision does. All right? So remember I said back when we were looking at the visual information that babies will often track mum or brighten up when mum comes in the room. It's less about seeing mummy and more about hearing her for the first couple of weeks and maybe smelling her. Right? Because visually they don't see very much at all. Okay? So think about these ideas. I think, yes, they're going to pay attention to mum's voice. She's the significant other. She's the feeder. Right? Even if dad tries to help with the feeding, likely he's not doing as much feeding as the mum is, certainly not in the first few weeks. Okay. So it's probable that yes. I don't actually know the answer to that one. I don't know. I suspect more to speech, but similar thing with the visual and the kinesthetic with adults, that we see hearing loss much more frequently in older adults than people our your age, right? Some of that could be physiological, so there could be some structural change in the sensory organ in the ear. There is research to show that hearing loss as we get older could be linked to jobs that we did when we were younger or other environmental noise. Initially, they were looking at things like pneumatic drills. So because having to wear those big earphones is a relatively new strategy for people that work with pneumatic drills. The people on the tarmac who are waving the planes in and out, right, have to wear those great big headsets now that cut down noise. That's relatively new because they were finding that people in these jobs were having significant hearing loss as they got older. Right? The other one that they're looking at that's very interesting is iPods. Okay. So now some of the manufacturers of little iPods or Walkmans, the headsets, now have a limit to how much you can turn the headset up. Right? It's built into the headset. You can only turn it up so loud. Because they were finding that kids who played their iPods really, really loudly were indicating some hearing problems. Right? You might be too young, but when they first came out, people would sit, on the train or on the bus, and you could be down the other end of the train and you knew exactly what they were listening to because it was blaring out so loud. Right? So it's not surprising that it may have had some long-term impact on their hearing health. Hearing amid a noisy background is more difficult as you get older. So, again, watch your grandparents. If they're on the phone or they're watching the TV, then they may be going, shh, shh, I can't, or they're turning it up because you're sitting there having a chat on the phone, whereas in the old days, they might have just carried on watching the telly, right? But as we get older, it becomes difficult to distinguish sounds, very similar to what we see happen with vision, right? The subtleties, the distinct differences in tones of letters or words starts to get lost unless it's really quiet and you can get a very clear signal. So, similar to visual, we've got figure ground auditory as well as figure ground visual ideas. Patterns of sound are part of what we listen to. So sometimes we know what someone said even if we didn't really hear it because the word sounds, the pattern of the word is familiar. Right? We've got to be able to tell differences in similar sounds. Some people are very, very good at auditory perception and identifying different accents. Some people aren't good at that, right? I'm not very good at that. I mean, I can do it broadly, like, oh, you come from the South, but I don't know whether you came from Mississippi or Alabama. Other people, just by hearing someone talk, could pinpoint someone exactly. Right? If you hear someone from Australasia, do you know whether they're from Australia or from New Zealand? Can you perceive the difference? They sound quite similar, but there are differences. They're not from the same place, right? Even within England, which is tiny, someone from London does not sound like someone from Liverpool, right? Can we tell the difference? And people are better or not as good at those kinds of ideas. Location, right? If my eyes are closed and someone talks to me, do I have an idea where they are? Right? As adults, we're quite good at that, but your brain has to learn that information. So, newborns will turn in the direction. We don't know about distance. And again, when we look at older adults, locating the sound is one of the things that might start to get frustrating for them. Okay? So they hear the sound, but they can't work out, pinpoint exactly where the sound came from. Right? So if their phone is going, right, they might be walking around the house trying to find the phone, and you're like, it's right there, and you hear it, right? Well, they hear it, but they can't put it into the space. Right? That can be one of the problems that occurs. We don't need to worry too much about differences. Patterns, I think, patterns is an important concept when we're teaching movement because the pattern of the sound gives me information about what's happening. Right? If I hear what my feet sound like on the ground, it gives me information about the kind of surface I'm running on. If I hear, as we said, if I hear slice or spin or block on the ball, gives me an idea of where I need to move to try to intercept that ball. So temporal patterns, music. Right? What's the difference between a waltz and a polka? Right? If I can't pick out temporal patterns, I can't identify 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 from, and 1, 2, 3, and 1, 2, 3. Right? So, how do I know the difference between a waltz and a polka if I don't learn temporal patterns of sound? Right? How do I know if someone is running or walking if I can't see them, if I don't understand the temporal patterning of the sound? So, we see development, obviously, if the auditory system is developing, then the brain's understanding of the timing of the sounds improves. There's a lot of argument about, if we play our children music when they're still in the womb, they'll be better at music when they're born. I don't know the answer to that. It's outside my realm. I expect it makes mum feel better, and therefore if mum feels better, the baby is going to be better, right? But I don't know whether it's true that we can really impact. I just don't know. I'm not saying it is reason. But the more practice we give them, the better they're going to be. So another thing you could do, yes, let them play a musical instrument. Yes, have music in the classroom or in the home. But in your gym, right? Another thing you could do, get them to listen. Close your eyes, listen, what do you hear? Right? Am I stamping? Am I running? Right? They sound different. I don't have to see them. to tell what's happening. I can hear it. Conversations amid background noise as we get older. Unless the conversation is really meaningful to you. So if there is an element that we call cocktail party syndrome, right? So you're at a party and there's lots of people in a very small space and everyone's talking, there's blah, 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 and someone says Sarah. Right? I heard blah, 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 Sarah. Wait. Right? And it could be someone on the other side of the room. But because they said my name, and that's very meaningful, that I hear. Right? Cocktail party syndrome. So that's an interesting one because you'll find, right, you guys do it. That's why sometimes I have to be a little crazy in the classroom because I'm watching you and you're all going, blah, 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 blah. And if I go, sex! You'll go, wait, what did she just say? Well, that's great. I needed you to listen to the 10 minutes before I said the S word, but saying the S word gets everyone's attention, right? Because it's meaningful to them, right? So it can be a useful teaching tool. All right, so sensory systems are functional at birth. Some of them appear to be functional before birth. Okay? And improvement in our sensory systems is very, very quick during infancy, so it's worth spending lots of time giving them experiences that help that improvement. Right? For me, a lot of this information is useful in identifying something that's not typical. So when I'm on the playground, sensory perceptual integration is a strong indicator of typical or atypical development. Right? If a child is developing typically, then I should see certain responses to certain things. William, no. Right? Maddox has some interesting sensory things because the whole taking his shoes off and wanting to feel, even in the freezing cold with his feet, it's like he's self-stimulating somehow. So that's a very interesting one. And if you're going to work with older adults, please remember that sensory information is degrading. So don't expect them to hear, see, feel what you hear, see, and feel. Allow for the fact that the information their brain is getting may be sub-quality at that point. Right? It's not their ability to understand the information. It's the quality of the information their brain is getting fed. So don't start talking to them like they're two, because that is very, very, very annoying. Okay? They understand it, they're just not getting the information clearly. How can you clear it up for them? Now, we don't have time to go through intermodal stuff, so please make sure that you look at that in this